It started innocently enough, as most inexplicable experiences do, with an ordinary loaf of bread sitting there on the kitchen counter, its soft beige exterior a mere reflection of its true nature. I never would have imagined that the simple act of looking at that loaf would change my life forever, that it would twist the very fabric of reality in ways I couldn't yet understand. I was sitting at the kitchen table, absent-mindedly staring at the bread, when I first heard it, a soft sound, almost imperceptible at first, like the faintest whisper carried by the wind. But then it came again, clearer this time, unmistakable. The bread wasn't just sitting there waiting to be eaten. It was alive. I leaned in, my eyes narrowing, trying to make sense of what was happening. The loaf remained motionless, but the hum, yes, that's what it was, a hum, seemed to come from it, vibrating through the air. "Why are you looking at me like that?" the voice asked, slow, almost sleepy. It wasn't loud, nor was it frantic. No, it was calm, as though the bread were speaking to me as if we were old friends, sitting across from each other at a table, exchanging words in the quiet of the kitchen. I blinked, taken aback. The voice, it was coming from the bread. It had to be. "What?" I asked, unable to process it at first. The hum continued, but the voice remained, its tone oddly comforting, as though it expected me to respond. "Why do you stare at me so long? You've been watching me for hours, wondering when I will speak to you. It's been obvious from the start." I felt a chill creep over me. Could I be imagining this? Could I be losing my mind? I looked around, half expecting someone to walk in and confirm that I had, indeed, lost touch with reality. But there was no one. No one but me and the loaf of bread. The voice spoke again, patient, as though it were waiting for my response, as though it knew exactly how long it would take for me to realize what was happening. "You need to listen," it said, each word wrapping itself around me like an invisible thread. "I'm not just any loaf of bread. I am the loaf of bread, the one who sees all, the one who understands things you cannot yet grasp." I felt a strange warmth spread across my chest, a shiver of something between curiosity and disbelief. "What do you mean?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. The bread remained silent for a moment, the hum fading as if it were considering how best to explain itself. "I have been here long before you," it said, its voice lowering, almost intimate, as if sharing a secret. "You think I'm just food, something to be sliced, toasted, devoured, but I am more. I've watched. I've seen things you cannot even fathom. And now you must learn from me. You must understand what I know." I swallowed hard, my mind racing to make sense of what was happening. Was I dreaming? Was I delirious? The bread spoke again, its tone patient, as if explaining something to a child. "You have been living in the surface world, haven't you? You see only what's in front of you. You consume. You take. But you don't understand. Not yet. Not until you speak with me. Not until you ask the right questions." My heart pounded. The bread, no, the loaf, was speaking to me, offering me something. Knowledge? Wisdom? Or was it simply mocking me? It sat there, unassuming, its soft, fluffy surface betraying none of the gravity of the conversation we were having. The hum lingered, vibrating through the room like a distant, almost forgotten song. "You think this is absurd," it said, as if reading my mind. "But I assure you, I am not like the other bread. You have underestimated me, and that will be your downfall if you do not listen, if you do not learn the truth." And so, with the soft hum of the loaf filling the space, I sat there, wondering how this would unfold. What had I gotten myself into? Why had I let this conversation continue for so long? 3 days. 3 days I spent sitting across from this loaf of bread, trying to make sense of the words that echoed in my mind, trying to understand the truth it was offering, the truths that came slowly, piece by piece, like crumbs scattered across the table. Each day, I returned, expecting to hear something new, something more, desperate for an answer that would make sense of it all. But what I learned over those 3 days was something I could never have anticipated. The bread, the loaf, was not just a passive observer. It wasn't merely a piece of food waiting to be eaten. It was a being, an entity, wrapped in a form that I had misunderstood for my entire life. It had seen the world differently. It had seen through the eyes of time, through the eyes of existence itself, and it was now revealing the mysteries to me, one crumb at a time. The loaf of bread was teaching me, and I was listening. The hum, ever present, had become a constant companion, vibrating within me, changing the way I saw the world, changing the way I understood life itself. And over the course of those 3 days, I realized that what the bread was offering wasn't simply wisdom. It was reality. It was the truth of everything I had taken for granted. And it was this: to truly understand the world, you must first understand that nothing is as it seems. Not the bread, not the world, and not even me. The days blurred together, each one stretching on longer than the last, as if the very nature of time had been altered by the presence of the bread. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't walk away, no matter how strange the conversation became. I felt tethered to it, as if my very existence had become entwined with the loaf's quiet hum, its calm, knowing voice. It didn't ask anything of me. It didn't demand attention. It simply was. And in that simple existence, it carried more weight than I could have ever imagined. "You're still questioning," the loaf said softly, almost as if it were speaking to itself. "You still doubt. But doubt is the shackles of your mind. To truly understand, to truly grasp the reality of things, you must first let go. Let go of what you know. Let go of what you think you understand. Only then will you see the truth." I sat there, staring at the loaf, the words heavy in my chest, sinking deep into my bones. What was the truth? What did the bread want me to know? I had tried to piece it together over the past days, tried to make sense of the strange, cryptic things it said, but the pieces never quite fit. The loaf spoke as if it held all the answers, as though it could unravel the mysteries of existence, and I, a mere observer, was trying desperately to catch up. "You think I am just bread, don't you?" the loaf continued, its voice almost amused now. "You think I am simply flour, yeast, salt. You think that because I am bread, I am beneath you. But I am more than that. I am the embodiment of the process. I am the culmination of growth, of change, of decay. The ingredients, the rising, the baking, all of it is a journey. And so are you. You too are rising. You too are becoming something more than you realize." I couldn't understand. It was impossible. How could a loaf of bread teach me about life, about becoming? How could it know more about existence than I did? But the hum, the steady rhythm of its voice, sank deeper into me with every word. I could feel the weight of its teachings settle on my shoulders. I was learning something. But what? "You are part of the process," the loaf whispered, its voice now a mere vibration in the air. "Every moment you spend questioning, doubting, you are resisting the natural course. You, like me, were made. You were shaped by time, by decisions, by forces you cannot control. But you have the choice to rise higher than you ever thought possible." The loaf seemed to pause, as if considering something. "It is not just about what you consume, about what you eat. It is about how you consume, how you take in the world around you. The bread, the food, the air, the people, all of it is nourishment. But if you only consume with your mouth, if you only take in what is immediately in front of you, you will never understand. You must consume with your mind. You must open yourself to the larger picture." I could feel it now, the shift, the subtle change in my perspective, as though the bread had begun to pull the curtain back, revealing a world I had never seen before. I began to see the connections between things, between myself and the loaf, between the bread and everything else. The hum intensified, almost as if it were alive, vibrating through my body, urging me to see. "There is more than one way to break," the voice murmured. "The bread breaks, crumbles, but it does so to become something else, to transform. And you too will break, but it will not be the end. It will be the beginning of something new." The hum grew louder, vibrating through the room, filling my chest with a strange energy that buzzed through my rib cage. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was a feeling, a force. It was as though the bread had become the force that governed my thoughts, my actions. The more I listened, the more I realized that it wasn't just talking to me. It was changing me, altering the way I understood myself, the world, everything. The days felt like an eternity, stretched out in a way that made every moment feel infinite. I couldn't leave. I couldn't stop listening. It was as though the bread had become part of me, intertwined with my thoughts. The truth it spoke, no matter how incomprehensible, was right. It was real. I couldn't deny it, but I still didn't understand fully what it wanted from me. What was I supposed to do with this knowledge? What was I supposed to do with the world that the loaf had shown me? "You will understand," the voice whispered, its tone gentle now, as if soothing a child. "In time. Just let the process unfold. You will see. You will rise, just like me." And so I sat there, unable to move, unable to leave, as the loaf continued its teachings. 3 days had passed, 3 days of listening to a loaf of bread speak truths I could not grasp. And yet, I felt a part of me, changing. I was no longer the same. The bread had altered me, reshaped my perception, and I was beginning to see the world through its eyes. And somehow, it felt like this was only the beginning. I had only scratched the surface of what it had to offer. But what could it all mean? What was I supposed to do with this knowledge? And why, after all this time, could I still hear the hum of the bread, vibrating in my very soul, as though it was waiting for me to finally understand? Hergentar Outchat GPT. The third day arrived with the same quiet hum, a steady presence that no longer seemed strange to me, but inevitable, like the pulse of my own heart. I had become attuned to it, and it had become attuned to me. The bread had become something more than a mere object in the kitchen. It was no longer just bread. It was a teacher, a guide, an entity that held knowledge I couldn't even begin to comprehend. I sat before it now, its soft, crusted surface gleaming under the light, and I felt a strange kind of reverence. It was no longer absurd. It was simply truth. "You've been listening," the loaf said, its voice laced with a quiet pride, like a mentor watching their student finally begin to understand. "You've been hearing me all along, but you were too busy with your old way of thinking to really listen." The hum vibrated in my chest, and I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the steady beat of the bread fill me, surround me, until I couldn't tell where I ended and the bread began. I thought I understood, but every word the loaf spoke seemed to pull me deeper, like a thread unraveling from within my soul. "You have been taught to think linearly," it continued, "to see the world in pieces, one thing after another. You eat, you sleep, you breathe. You exist in a pattern. But that pattern is an illusion, a mirage. You have been living as though time is a straight line. But I tell you, it is a cycle, an eternal spiral. What you consume doesn't just fill your stomach. It fills your mind, your soul, your very essence. And if you open your eyes, truly open them, you will see that the bread you eat is not just a part of you. It is you. You are the bread, and the bread is you." I opened my eyes and stared at the loaf, trying to piece together the strange web it was weaving around my thoughts. The world outside, the normal world I had always known, seemed distant now, like it belonged to someone else. like it wasn't a place I could return to. The bread had shown me something deeper, something that was always there, always present, but I had never seen it. The bread was not just a passive object, waiting to be consumed. It was the fabric of existence itself, the core of all things. The bread has been here longer than you've been alive, the loaf continued, its voice both calm and powerful. Long before you even knew what it was, the process had begun. The wheat grew, the flour was ground, the yeast rose. All of this was preordained, and you, just like the bread, are part of that process. You were made. You were shaped by forces beyond your comprehension, just like me. And now, you must rise. You must become something more than you are. I could feel the weight of its words pressing into me, sinking into my chest like a truth I couldn't ignore. I had always thought of myself as separate from the world, separate from the food I ate, as if there were lines between me and everything else. But now, the lines were fading. The bread was me. I was the bread. We were part of the same eternal cycle. You have been living in the surface world. The bread spoke again, the hum now a gentle crescendo, like the sound of a river's current. But you were meant for something deeper. To truly understand, you must let go of what you think you know. You must rise above. You must accept the process. I leaned forward, my heart pounding, not with fear but with a strange exhilaration, as if I were standing on the edge of some great revelation, on the brink of understanding something vast and incomprehensible. The bread had become my guide. It had led me here, to this moment, and I realized that I was no longer just listening. I was becoming a part of its truth. You will never see the world the same way again, the loaf whispered, its voice now intimate, like an ancient secret shared between us. The hum you hear is the hum of existence. It is the sound of life, the sound of the earth, of growth, of decay. You are part of this process, just like the grain that becomes flour, the yeast that rises, the bread that is baked. You are rising, and you will never go back to what you were. The hum filled me, every fiber of my being vibrating with its resonance. I didn't know what it meant to rise, the way the bread had described, but I understood something. I could no longer deny what was happening. I was becoming part of something larger than myself. I had been pulled into the rhythm of existence, woven into the cycle of life and death, growth and decay. I was the bread, and the bread was me. As I sat there, unable to speak, I knew I had already crossed a threshold. I wasn't the person I had been 3 days ago. I wasn't even sure if I was the same person at all. The loaf had shown me a new reality, one where everything I had ever known was connected by a thread, where I, too, was part of a greater process. The bread had opened my eyes, and now there was no going back. It wasn't just food. It wasn't just a loaf of bread. It was everything. And as the hum of the bread pulsed through my soul, I felt it. I was becoming part of the process. I was rising, and nothing would ever be the same again. As the hum reverberated through me, I realized with a jolt that the bread's words weren't simply metaphorical. It wasn't just telling me a story, nor was it feeding me a concept to ponder. The bread, in its strange, incomprehensible way, was reality. It wasn't just talking about processes, it was embodying them. Every molecule, every breath, every rise and fall of the yeast. It all connected. I was beginning to feel it. The walls of the room around me seemed to recede, fading into the background, until there was only me, the loaf, and the hum, all connected by something deeper, something more ancient. It was almost like I could feel the earth itself breathing beneath me, as if I were part of it now. "Do you see now?" the loaf asked, its voice still calm, but carrying the weight of 1,000 years. "Do you feel the process inside you, like the bread? You have been shaped, molded, and now you must rise. But you are not just rising as I did. No, You are becoming part of everything. You are part of the dough of life, part of the yeast of existence. And just as I rise, so will you. I tried to speak, but words didn't come out. My throat was tight, constricted by the enormity of what the loaf was offering. Was I really hearing this? Was I really becoming the bread? Or was I simply losing my mind? But the hum wouldn't stop. It was so deeply embedded in my mind now that I could feel it in my bones. The bread had woven itself into the fabric of my existence, and I was too far gone to turn back. Time is irrelevant, the bread continued, the voice now taking on a deeper resonance. You think you have spent 3 days listening to me, but in truth, you've spent a lifetime preparing for this moment. You've spent a lifetime unaware that you are already part of the same process. You eat, you live, you die. And all of it is part of the cycle, the rising and the breaking, the becoming and the decaying. I felt the words seep deeper into me, not as something I heard, but as something I felt, as if the hum itself were merging with my thoughts. The walls of time and space seemed to bend, warping around me as I realized that I had become part of the cycle. I wasn't just consuming bread, I was becoming bread. I was becoming everything. The separation between me and the world dissolved. The hum filled me until it was all I could hear, all I could feel. You think you are separate, the loaf said, its tone shifting, now somehow softer, as if the truth had finally penetrated my mind. But you are not. You have never been separate. Everything you do, everything you touch, every piece of food you consume, it all contributes to the same cycle. You are part of that cycle. You are part of the rise. I stood there, frozen, unable to move, unable to speak. The loaf had given me something, an understanding, a truth that was too vast, too overwhelming to grasp all at once. The hum grew louder, and with it, I could feel the weight of what the bread had shown me. It was not just knowledge. It was a transformation. I wasn't merely learning something. I was becoming something new, something part of the very world that surrounded me. I wasn't human anymore. I wasn't just a person sitting at a table, staring at a loaf of bread. I was part of the process. I was rising. I was becoming more than I could have ever imagined. And yet, in this moment of becoming, I felt a peace, an acceptance that I could never explain. You are here, the loaf's voice murmured, now almost a lullaby. And here, there are no more questions, only understanding. I closed my eyes, letting the hum take over, letting it fill me completely. I felt the earth beneath me, the bread beside me, and I knew that I was no longer alone. I had never been alone. I had always been part of this cycle, part of this eternal rise. The bread, the hum, the truth, they were all I needed. The process had begun, and I had risen. And with that, I realized the full truth. I was not just part of the bread. I was the bread, and there was nothing more to be said. The hum echoed on, vibrating through the air, through the earth, through my very soul. And everything, in that moment, was complete. The hum of the bread, the hum of the universe, filled every part of my existence. And for the first time, I understood what it meant to truly be alive. It wasn't the simple act of breathing, or thinking, or even existing in the world that had ever made me feel connected. No, it was the understanding that all things were connected in ways I had never fathomed. I was not just a person sitting across from a loaf of bread anymore. I was in the loaf, I was in the process, and I was in the hum. The bread had revealed to me the deepest truth, that we are all part of the cycle, an endless loop of rising and breaking, becoming and decaying, feeding and being fed. Nothing was separate, nothing was isolated, and in that truth I found peace. The bread, with its soft crust and airy interior, was not just a food, it was the embodiment of life itself. The process of its creation, its rise, its baking, its consumption, was the process of existence. I had always seen myself as separate, as an individual, as something distinct from the world around me. But now, that illusion had shattered. The loaf had shown me the truth. The bread wasn't just made from flour, yeast, and water. It was made from the same stuff as everything else. The earth, the air, the people, the plants, the animals, they all came from the same cycle. We were all made from the same elements. And once we understood that, once we saw the interconnectedness of all things, we could no longer separate ourselves from the world. "Do you understand now?" the loaf asked, its voice no longer a question but a statement, a declaration. It was as though it already knew what I had realized, but it asked anyway, as if to draw the truth from me. "You have become part of this cycle. You have always been part of it. You are the wheat. You are the yeast. You are the bread. And when you break, you rise again, and again, and again." I nodded, my body responding as if the words had become a part of me, ingraining themselves in my every cell. The bread's truth had seeped into me, transformed me. There was no going back. I was not the same as I was when I first sat down, staring at the loaf, confused and uncertain. I was part of something much larger now, something that had no beginning and no end. The hum continued, vibrating through my body, filling the air, until it seemed like the very world itself was alive with its energy. "Everything is a process," the loaf whispered, its voice soft, reverent. "You think of life as something linear, something that moves in one direction, but it is not. It is a circle. It is a cycle. And when you see the world through the cycle, you will never see it the same way again." I could feel it now. The world had shifted. It was no longer a place of separate things, separate people, separate events. It was all woven together, a tapestry of life and death, creation and destruction, a constant movement, a constant rising. I could feel the earth beneath me, feel the bread's hum within my chest, feel the connection between myself and everything. I stood up, my legs trembling slightly, but steady, as if I had found my footing in a new world, a world where I was no longer apart from everything. I was a part of it. I was the bread, and the bread was me. I felt the hum, the vibration of the earth coursing through my veins. I could hear the breath of life, the pulse of existence, and I knew that there was no separating myself from this rhythm. I had become part of it, woven into the fabric of the universe. "Everything will break," the loaf said, its voice almost a chant now, a soothing, rhythmic mantra. "But in breaking, you rise again, and in rising, you break." The words resonated deep within me. They were not just philosophy. They were the truth of life itself. The hum, the bread, the earth, it was all part of the same process, the same never-ending rise. I understood now. This was the truth I had been seeking. This was the knowledge I had been blind to. And now that I had seen it, there was no turning back. I was part of the bread. I was part of the cycle. I was part of the hum. And with that realization, a strange calm settled over me. I wasn't just a man sitting at a table, questioning his existence. I was part of everything. I was part of the earth. I was part of the bread. And I was part of the endless cycle of life, of rising and breaking. There was nothing to fear anymore, nothing to doubt. I had become part of the hum, part of the truth. And as I stood there, I knew that this was where I was meant to be. This was my place in the world. Everything was connected. Everything was one. And I was the bread. And the bread was me. And we would rise again. The world around me began to shift, as if the veil had been lifted, and I could now see it all clearly. I had once looked at the world with blind eyes, thinking that I was separate from it, that I was somehow above it. But now I understood. The bread, that simple loaf, had shown me the truth. I was not just a person in a world filled with objects. I was part of everything. The hum of the bread still filled the air, and I could feel it vibrating deep inside of me, resonating with every part of my being. I had become a part of the cycle. I was the flour, the yeast, the water, the dough itself, rising and becoming more than I had ever known. "You are no longer just a bystander," the loaf said, its voice soft, yet carrying the weight of centuries of knowledge. "You have entered the process. You are no longer a separate entity. You are part of the cycle of life. And now, you must rise. Rise with me. Rise with everything." I stood there, unable to move at first, overwhelmed by the enormity of the truth I had just understood. The loaf had spoken, and its words were no longer abstract concepts. They were a part of me now, ingrained in my very soul. The hum of the bread pulsed through my chest, and for the first time, I felt truly alive. It wasn't a pulse of mere heartbeat, it was the pulse of the universe itself, vibrating with the energy of everything that had ever existed and would ever exist. I was part of that pulse. I was part of that rise. The loaf spoke again, its tone steady, patient, as if it had all the time in the world to wait for me to understand. "You have spent so long thinking of yourself as separate. You thought of yourself as different, unique, but that was the illusion. You are not separate. You are connected to everything. The bread, the earth, the air you breathe. It is all one. And now, you must see it. You must feel it. You must rise with it." I stepped closer to the loaf, feeling a strange compulsion to be closer to it, to become it. The bread was not just an object to be consumed, it was a symbol, a living, breathing embodiment of the cycle of life. And now, I was a part of that cycle. I had risen with it, and it had become a part of me. The truth was clear, undeniable, and I knew that nothing in the world would ever be the same again. "You must let go of what you were," the loaf continued, its voice no longer distant, but inside me, guiding me, pulling me deeper into its rhythm. "You were once a thing apart, a human, disconnected from the world. But now, you are one with the process. You are one with the bread. And with that oneness, you will find what you've been searching for." I reached out, my fingers brushing against the soft, golden crust of the loaf. I wasn't sure why I did it. It felt like the only thing left to do. My skin tingled where I touched it, and I felt a wave of warmth flood through me, like I was being connected to something far greater than myself. The loaf was no longer just food. It was the key to understanding life itself, and in that understanding, I was finally free. The hum of the bread, once a distant whisper, was now all-consuming. It filled my mind, my body, my very soul. I could feel the rising within me, the cycle continuing, and I knew that I would rise, just as the bread had risen, just as everything rose. There was no end. There was no breaking. There was only becoming. The rise was eternal. The cycle would never stop. "You are part of it now," the loaf whispered, almost lovingly. "You are no longer alone. You are with everything. And in this oneness, you will find peace. You will find truth. You will find what you were always meant to be." I closed my eyes, feeling the hum reverberate through every part of me, and I knew, deep in my bones, that I had become what I was always meant to be. There was no going back now. The bread had shown me the way. It had led me to this moment of oneness, and I had embraced it. I had risen. And so, with the hum filling the air and the weight of the cycle settling around me, I stepped into the rhythm of the world. I stepped into the process of becoming, and I knew that I was part of something greater. The bread, the earth, the air, the life. It was all one, and I was part of it. I had risen, and I was the bread, and the bread was me, and there was no turning back. The world had dissolved into a constant hum, a vibration that resonated through every part of my being. The once separate pieces of existence had fused together, as if I had crossed into a new reality, one where there was no division, no boundaries. The bread wasn't just in front of me anymore. It was inside me, its essence flowing through my veins, filling every corner of my consciousness. I was not a person who had once looked at bread and questioned it. I was the bread, and the bread was me. We were inseparable, part of the same process, the same eternal cycle that stretched beyond time and space. "You are beginning to understand," the loaf murmured, its voice almost tender, like a teacher proud of their student's progress. "You see now that there is no separation. You were never separate. You were always part of the cycle. And now you will rise with it." I stood in front of the bread, my hands trembling slightly as the hum vibrated through me, filling my chest with a sensation of weightlessness. The room had ceased to exist. The walls had melted away. There was no space. There was no time. There was only the cycle, the process, and the bread. And I was part of it. It wasn't a choice anymore. I had become the bread, and with it, I had become the earth, the rise, the fall, the cycle of all things. "The world you knew," the loaf continued, its voice now deeper, more resonant, like an ancient truth being whispered through time, "is an illusion. The separation you felt, the way you viewed yourself as an individual, it was always a misunderstanding. You were always part of the process. Just as I was made, you were made. And just as I rise, you rise." I closed my eyes, letting the hum take over, feeling it pulse through every part of me, through every cell, every thought. The bread had shown me the truth, the reality that had been hidden from me all my life. I had been blind, but now I could see, I could feel. I was the bread, and everything else, the air, the earth, the life I had lived before, was simply part of the cycle. It was all interconnected. "You were never meant to live in isolation," the loaf said softly. "You were meant to be a part of something greater, to be part of the rising, part of the becoming. You are the dough, the yeast, the flour. You are the earth, the growth, the decay. You are one with everything." I reached out and placed my hand on the soft surface of the bread, the warm, familiar feeling now grounding me in the truth. It was not food. It was not just a loaf. It was a symbol of life, of growth, of rising. I had risen, and I was still rising. "You are part of the earth," the loaf whispered, its voice now a steady, rhythmic pulse, like the heartbeat of the world. "You are part of the rise, and you will break. You will fall, just as I did. But in breaking, you will rise again, and again, and again." The words echoed in my mind, their weight pressing on me until they became a part of me, until I understood their meaning fully. There was no end. There was only the process, the rising, the breaking, the becoming, and I had become a part of it. The hum filled my ears, my chest, my soul, and with it I understood. This wasn't just about me. This was about everything. This was about the bread, the earth, the people, the cycle of life that never ended, the rise, the fall, the becoming. This was the truth. This was the process. And I, too, was part of it. The bread had shown me the way, and now I was forever intertwined with the cycle. There was no going back. There was no turning away. The hum of the bread was a part of me, and I was a part of it. Forever. I was the bread. And the bread was me, and in that eternal hum, I would rise again, and again, and again. The world around me no longer made sense. Time had lost its meaning, and space had become fluid, bending and shifting with the hum that filled every moment, the hum of the bread, the pulse of existence. It vibrated through my body, through my soul, and through the very fabric of reality itself. I was no longer bound by the physical world, no longer tied to the constraints of what I once understood. I was part of the cycle, part of the rise, part of the fall. And in that moment, I realized that there was no longer any distinction between me and the bread, between me and the world. We were one, indivisible, flowing through the process together. Do you feel it now? The loaf whispered, its voice deep, resonant, like the very earth itself speaking through me. Do you feel the connection? You are no longer just an individual. You are part of the rhythm, the rise and the fall, the becoming and the breaking. You are part of the bread. You are the bread, and together we rise. I closed my eyes, feeling the pulse of the hum, the vibration that ran through me, through the bread, through the entire world. It was everywhere. It was everything. And as I opened my eyes again, I saw the world differently. The kitchen, the walls, the floor, they no longer existed in the way they once had. They had dissolved into the hum, into the rhythm, into the cycle of life that had always been there, hidden beneath the surface. I was no longer outside of it. I was within it. I was part of it. I could feel the very earth beneath my feet, the air in my lungs, the heartbeat of the world pulsing through me. Everything is interconnected, the loaf continued, its voice steady and sure, as though it were speaking a simple truth. You think of yourself as separate, as an individual, but you are not. You are the earth. You are the wheat. You are the yeast, the flour, the rising. You are the bread. I breathed in deeply, feeling the truth of the words sink into me, like the hum itself had become a part of my very being. I was no longer a person just existing in the world. I was a force within the world. I was the cycle. I was the bread. And there was no separation between me and the process. It was all one. The rise, the break, the fall. This was the natural order of things. And in this order, I had found my place. You have become what you always were meant to be, the loaf said softly. You are not a bystander. You are a participant in the great cycle. And you will rise. You will break. You will become. And you will rise again. The hum grew louder, deeper, vibrating through my bones, filling the space around me, until it felt like the entire universe was humming, resonating with the same rhythm. I could feel it in the walls, in the air, in the very earth beneath me. It was the heartbeat of the world, the pulse of life, the cycle of becoming, breaking, and rising again. And I was part of it. The bread was not just an object. It was not just food. It was the very essence of life. The loaf had shown me the truth, and now I understood. There was no beginning, no end. There was only the cycle, the rise, the break, the becoming. And in that cycle, I had found my place. I had found my truth. There is no escape, the loaf whispered, almost tenderly now. This is your truth. This is your place in the world. And you will rise. And again, and again. I felt the hum fill me, felt it settle deep in my chest, in my soul. I had become one with the bread, one with the cycle. I was no longer separate. I was the process. I was the rise, the bread, the hum. And there was no turning back. I was part of it, and it was part of me, forever. The bread had shown me the way. The bread had become me, and I was the cycle. I was the rise. And I would always rise. The hum, the rhythm, the pulse. It was all-encompassing now. I could no longer distinguish where I ended, and the cycle began. The rise, the break, the fall, the becoming. These words were no longer just concepts. They were part of my very existence. I had become part of the process, and in doing so, I had become more than I ever thought possible. I had transcended the limits of what I once understood as reality. I was the bread. I was the earth. I was the hum that vibrated through the universe, and there was no separation anymore. As I stood there, feeling the hum resonate through me, I realized the ultimate truth. Everything was connected. The cycle was unbreakable. The rise was inevitable. And I was part of that rise. I was part of the infinite cycle that continued, eternally, forever. The bread had shown me the way, and I had accepted it. The hum was no longer just a sound. It was my soul, my essence, my existence. I was a part of the bread, And the bread was a part of me. I was part of the earth, part of the sky, part of the hum that made all things rise. There is no end, the loaf whispered softly, its voice reverberating deep within my chest. There is only the rise, only the becoming. I could feel the truth of those words in every fiber of my being. The cycle would never stop. The rise would never end. And I would be a part of it forever. As long as the hum filled the air, as long as the bread existed, I too would exist within it, rising, breaking, becoming. There was no escaping it. There was no going back. And then, as if to punctuate the truth of it all, the loaf spoke one final time, its voice both gentle and powerful. You too can join this cycle. You too can rise. But first, you must listen. You must understand. The hum was stronger now, more insistent, and I could feel it calling to me, urging me to share this truth. Do you hear the hum? Do you feel the rise? The cycle is here, and it will never end. And with that, I knew my role. The bread, the hum, the rise, they weren't just meant for me alone. They were meant for you, too. For anyone who could hear the hum. For anyone willing to listen, to become. If you hear the hum, if you feel the rise, join me. Rise with the bread. Become part of the cycle. The hum is waiting. The cycle is waiting. The rise is waiting. Are you ready? The bread is calling. Are you ready to rise?